Chapter 1. Before Vita. In the 1980s, nobody expected Sony to become a major player in the video game industry. The video game crash in the early 1980s destroyed most of the US video game companies, but the industry was reinvigorated by Nintendo. By the end of the decade, Nintendo dominated the home console market with the Nintendo Entertainment System and the portable games market with the Game Boy. Sony was arguably the biggest consumer electronics brand in the world, famous for the Walkman and their range of TV sets. Sony attempted to partner with Nintendo to release a CD-based system compatible with Super Nintendo games, but Nintendo snubbed and embarrassed Sony publicly by partnering instead with Philips. This was the start of Sony's drive to challenge Nintendo's domination of the video game market, with the release of the PlayStation in 1994. The Game Boy and Game Boy Advance were two of the most successful video game machines ever released, selling 119 million units and 81 million units respectively. But Sony's announcement of the PlayStation Portable in 2003 sent a shockwave through the industry. The PlayStation 1 had significantly outsold the Nintendo 64, with its reputation for being a device for mature gamers. Nintendo was already seen as more difficult for third-party developers and publishers to work with, so Sony's friendly approach to working with developers led to more third-party games on their system. Where the N64 cartridge-based system was restrictive in terms of capacity and ability, the PlayStation allowed games of better graphics, sound and complexity to run, and with cheaper disc manufacturing costs. Continuing into the PlayStation 2 generation, Sony had already secured brand loyalty and continued to maintain good relationships with developers and publishers. That meant big-name games were exclusive to the PlayStation 2, despite the console being less powerful than Nintendo's GameCube. The PSP was an extension of the design and mantra that led to the PlayStation 2's success. More powerful than the Game Boy Advance, with mature games and the ability to play music, watch movies and surf the internet. Nintendo was caught off guard by the announcement. Their own seemingly knee-jerk reaction announcement of the Nintendo DS in November 2003 could not assuage rumours that Nintendo would no longer rule the handheld gaming market. In 2004, the PSP was revealed. The sleek black system with a large colourful screen made Nintendo's plastic grey DS look even more childish. When Nintendo showcased minigames to justify the existence of the touchscreen on the DS, Sony showed games from popular PlayStation franchises like Metal Gear and Wipeout. Although the PSP was announced earlier, Nintendo launched the DS in Japan and North America in 2004, whereas the PSP only launched in Japan in December 2004. And 2005 in North America and Europe. Both systems sold well at launch, but despite the positive buzz surrounding the PSP, the DS exceeded the first week's sales of the PSP. It was the first indication that Nintendo DS might not be as doomed as expected. The PSP went on to sell over 80 million units, making it one of the best-selling video game systems of all time. The DS sold considerably more with over 150 million units sold, but the sales of the PSP were enough for Sony to justify launching another handheld, the PlayStation Vita. Chapter 2. The NGP. Following months of rumour and speculation, Sony announced a successor to the PSP. The system codenamed the Next Generation Portable, NGP, was revealed at an event in Tokyo in January 2011. It featured a 5-inch OLED multi-touch front screen, back touchpad, motion sensors, front and back cameras, and, most importantly from a gaming perspective, dual analog sticks. The NGP would use small game cartridges, dropping support for PSP's Universal Media Disc format. Sony showed off its biggest franchises like Uncharted, Killzone, Wipeout, Little Big Planet and Resistance running on the device. And third parties showed off tech demos of popular games like Call of Duty and Metal Gear Solid 4. NGP games would even support trophies, a fan favourite feature on the PlayStation 3, where players earn virtual trophies for achieving objectives in-game. The reception was positive. The PSP had very few games being released towards the end of its life, so a new Sony handheld that could play first-person shooters with 2 analog sticks replicating the console experience was exciting. Media outlets praised not only the stylish and comfortable design, but also the tech inside the system. The low-power, high-performance ARM Cortex-A9 processor meant that the NGP was significantly more powerful than current smartphones and tablets, but used similar architecture allowing ease of development. With the variety of control inputs, it seemed like Sony were appealing to both the core gaming audience and those that played touchscreen games on mobile devices. The NGP was designed to compete with both the 3DS and smartphones. There was apprehension on whether it could truly compete with mobile devices, but it seemed to be a foregone conclusion that the NGP would outperform the 3DS. The dual analog sticks were a particularly important addition. The Call of Duty series was the best-selling gaming franchise at the time, with millions of copies sold of each game released since Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. The promise of a Call of Duty game being playable on a handheld with dual analog sticks was exciting for gamers and the wider industry. This feature had been requested since the PSP had been revealed, and PSP fans were excited that Sony was finally launching a device that could deliver the console gaming experience on the go that had been promised with the PSP. Nintendo had officially announced the 3DS just 6 months earlier. The glasses-free 3D system with 2 screens also had a generally positive reception at its reveal. However, the announcement of the NGP just a month before the 3DS launch took the wind out of Nintendo's sails. Suddenly, the 3DS looked more like a device for children, except parents were told that children under 6 years of age could damage their eyes by playing games in 3D. Coupled with a launch library lacking Nintendo's biggest franchises, resulted in the 3DS launch sales underperforming globally compared to its predecessor, the DS. The stage seemed to be set for Nintendo to lose its crown as the king of handheld gaming. Chapter 3. Building the Hype. E3 2011 was Sony's big push for their new portable, and by all accounts it was a success. Sony had a lot to prove at E3 that year. Not only were they launching a new system, but the PlayStation Network had recovered only a month earlier from a hack that had resulted in 23 days of network outage. Sony's press conference opened with a well-received apology from head of Sony Computer Entertainment America, Jack Tretton, as well as footage of hotly anticipated new PS3 releases such as Uncharted 3 and Resistance 3. The news that stole the headlines in both the dedicated gaming press and the mainstream media, however, was the NGP, now officially named the PlayStation Vita. Sony revealed that the Vita would be launching in 2011 and would cost $249.99 for the Wi-Fi only model and $299.99 for the 3G Wi-Fi model, which was well below industry predictions. The Vita would be the successor to the PSP, which had sold well but had been eclipsed by the Nintendo DS. Sony didn't want to take any chances of history repeating itself, and so priced the Vita at the same price as the 3DS, aggressively challenging Nintendo's domination of the handheld market. Sony demoed games that would be available for the PlayStation Vita, including Uncharted Golden Abyss, Resistance Burning Skies, Mod Nation Racers Road Trip, Wipeout 2048, and many more. There was even an announcement from Ken Levine, creator of BioShock, that there would be a brand new entry in the BioShock series made exclusively for the handheld. In addition, Sony showed off how PlayStation 3 games could be streamed and played on the Vita via remote play, demonstrated with Killzone 3. Sony informed the audience that there were 100 games in development. The news was nothing but positive. Nintendo's 3DS also had a good showing at E3, but up to that point the games launched for the system had been unimpressive. In those first few months, the biggest games for the system were ports of previously released titles, for example Star Fox 64 and Street Fighter 4. A remake of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was scheduled to launch just 2 weeks after E3, and Nintendo showed off Luigi's Mansion, a new Kid Icarus game, Mario Kart 7 and Super Mario 3D Land, all scheduled to launch by the end of 2011. However, these announcements couldn't put to rest rumours that the 3DS was failing. After selling 3.6 million units in the first 5 weeks of release, the drop in sales was massive, resulting in less than 1 million units being sold in the first 3 months from April to June 2011. With the Vita priced the same as the 3DS, Nintendo's newest handheld was looking more and more like a flop. Prior to E3 2011, analysts predicted that the Vita would be priced over $300, potentially $400. Therefore, Sony surprised the industry with the $250 price tag. Sony's Kaz Hirai, who would later go on to be the global CEO of the company, stated that Sony didn't expect to make a profit on the Vita for the first 3 months of its life. Each unit would be sold at a loss, with game sales expected to eventually recoup the losses. Kazuhari Miura, an analyst for SMBC Nikko Securities, estimated Sony would be losing 5,000 yen, approximately $65 per unit. Despite this, Sony were upbeat about the Vita's prospects, with predictions it would outsell its predecessor, the PSP. Chapter 4. The First Cracks. If the Vita had launched just after E3 2011, its fortunes might have been radically different. Sony had a successful showing, and although the price of the memory cards was yet to be revealed, the buzz for the Vita was overwhelmingly positive. The 3DS meanwhile was seen as a subpar system with a 3D gimmick that no one wanted and very few worthwhile games. Nintendo recognized the 3DS was in trouble and they did something about it. In July 2011, just over a month after the Vita's price was revealed, Nintendo dropped the price of the 3DS by around 30%, from $249 to $170, and even compensated early adopters with 20 free retro games. Only a month earlier the Vita made the 3DS look overpriced, but now the tables had turned. The Vita started looking a lot less attractive. The price drop was seen as not only a response to the Vita, but also to compensate for the declining handheld market due to smartphones. When the DS and PSP were launched, smartphones were years away from becoming mainstream devices. In 2011, phones could be used to surf the internet, watch movies, listen to music, play games that were far cheaper than those on the 3DS, and of course make phone calls. The market had moved on between the DS and 3DS launches, with analysts questioning whether dedicated handheld gaming devices could succeed at all, now that smartphone gaming had become so popular. The sales of the 3DS between February and July 2011 supported the argument that dedicated gaming handhelds were unnecessary. Up to that point, Nintendo was not having a good year. 3DS sales were well below expectations, the company had made a loss for the financial year, and the reveal of their new console, the Nintendo Wii U, left consumers confused and unimpressed. The 3DS price cut was welcomed by the industry, and more importantly, by consumers. Sales went from around 800,000 units from April to June 2011 to 2.2 million units from July to September 2011. The outlook was even more positive for the rest of the year when Nintendo would launch its biggest brand name, Mario, with 2 new games for the system. Mario Kart 7 and Super Mario 3D Land would be released before Christmas 2011. Coupled with the far cheaper price tag, the 3DS's fortune seemed to have been completely changed. This change in fortune seemed to come at the Vita's expense, as the outlook for Sony's handheld was on the decline. Despite the fact that the Vita was already priced at a loss for Sony, the 3DS price cut sparked rumours and expectations of a similar price cut from Sony. The analyst Hideki Yasuda from Ace Securities stated, "Gamers are increasingly anticipating Sony to lower prices, especially after the 3DS cut." Sony's head of worldwide studios Shuhei Yoshida told Eurogamer in August 2011 that Sony were happy with the Vita's price and had no plans to cut it. However, the damage was done. Where once the Vita's price was seen as a positive for the system, it was now seen as too high compared to its nearest competitor, the 3DS, leaving Sony in a difficult position. The Vita was already priced at a loss, and dropping the price further was not financially feasible, but maintaining the price made the 3DS look more appealing. The gaming media's outlook on the Vita was still overall positive, but more bad news was on the way. In September 2011, Sony had another strong showing at their Tokyo Game Show press conference, announcing big games coming to the Vita, including remakes of popular titles Final Fantasy X, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, and Zone of Enders 1 and 2. There was also a reveal of Japan's 26-game launch lineup and confirmed support for PSP digital games. The PSP support in particular meant that there would be hundreds of games playable on the Vita at launch, which was important as Nintendo's 3DS offered backwards compatibility with their DS console games. The company also revealed that the Vita's battery life would last 3 to 5 hours, which was seen as disappointing, but it was at least in line with Nintendo's 3DS. However, the most shocking announcement came 2 days after the presentation. On September 15th, a Sony press release revealed the price of the Vita's memory cards in Japan. It was already known that the Vita would use proprietary memory cards, which was an attempt to curb the piracy that had ravaged the PSP. However, the price had been a mystery up to that point. Sony confirmed the memory card sizes would range from 4GB to 32GB, with the cheapest memory card costing 2,200 yen or $29, and the most expensive costing 9,500 yen, $124, around 40% of the Japanese price of the system, and not far from the price of the 3DS. While the official prices for memory cards for the US and Europe hadn't been announced, the damage was done. Not only was the Vita $70 more expensive than the 3DS, but now it looked even less competitive when you factor in the memory card, which was mandatory for some games. Comparatively, the 3DS used SD cards, which was significantly cheaper. In an effort to limit piracy on the Vita, Sony damaged the reputation of the device permanently. Even years after the system launched, it was still criticized by many for the overpriced memory cards, which is cited as one of the main causes of the console's failure. In an interview with the Japanese site Impress Watch, members of the device development team stated that Sony chose to use proprietary memory cards to ensure players wouldn't have to worry about the various read-write speeds of the SD cards, and also to ensure security of the device. However, this did not justify the lack of storage on the Vita itself, and therefore forcing consumers to buy the overpriced memory cards. To make matters worse, it was revealed that only one PlayStation Network account could be assigned to a memory card. If players wanted to use a second PSN account on their Vita, they would need a separate memory card and then would need to perform a device reset to set the Vita up again using the other PSN account. The PlayStation 3 allowed players to set up and swap between multiple PSN accounts with ease, which had the advantage of allowing users to buy digital games from different territories. It was yet another disappointment for potential Vita buyers. Trophies were a big selling point of the Vita to those gamers invested in the PlayStation brand. But more bad news came in December, when a manual for the Vita stated that trophies could only be earned by the first user of a physical game. This indicated that players could not earn trophies for second-hand games, effectively forcing players interested in trophies to buy all games new. This later turned out to be untrue, and trophies could be easily earned on second-hand games with a few simple steps. But it was yet another demonstration of Sony's poor messaging of the system in the lead-up to its launch. September 2011 was an eventful month for Nintendo also. The company announced a 3DS accessory that would be called a Circle Pad Pro in the West, which was an attachment to the console that gave it a second analog stick. Nintendo was criticized for announcing the accessory only months after the 3DS launch. It was tantamount to an admission that the 3DS should have had a second analog stick at launch. But the reveal of the first game to be compatible with the Circle Pad Pro was the bigger piece of news. The Monster Hunter games were incredibly popular in Japan, and up to that point they had been synonymous with Sony's PSP, with the most recent entry, Portable Third, shifting nearly 5 million copies in the region. However, Nintendo reached an agreement with Capcom and secured exclusivity on the 3DS of the next portable Monster Hunter game, Monster Hunter 3G, a remake of the Nintendo Wii's Monster Hunter 3. The game was announced to be launched in Japan in December of that year, just weeks before the Vita's release date. In just 3 months, Nintendo completely turned around the 3DS's fortunes. Between the strong lineup of upcoming games and the price drop, consumers were seeing the value of the 3DS, and sales reflected this. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and check out my channel for more PS Vita videos and reviews. Also, take a look at the links in the description for PS Vita books and manuals that I've written. Come back next month for part 2.